WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
If the fight could be made between Demetrius and Jamal, I have to go back a few years. When I was training Jamal, he had a signed contract to fight Demetrius Andrade. Then Demetrius wanted to sign with Rock Nation, and they told him don't take the fight with Jamal, otherwise they wouldn't go sign him. And he didn't. He backed out of the fight. And that really made the twins mad. And from that day on, they said they would never, ever give him a shot if they were world champion.
If that's the case, then all this unification talk coming from Jermall Charlo is little more than just that. Talk, because that's probably the only unification fight that he can have here today. He's not going to get a Canelo fight, not in 2020, and certainly not in early 2021. Canelo's all tied up with that legal battle with DAZN and Golden Boy Promotions. Gennady Golovkin, you can fucking forget about it.
Forget it.
Jermall Charlo isn't a blip on Gennady Golovkin's radar.
He just isn't.
Without condoning or condemning. That's what's going on. That's the situation. Look, I talked about all of this in my previous video. Listen, I think that Gennady Golovkin should fight Jermall Charlo. I just don't think that he will. I mean, it's not like that Canelo Alvarez situation is looking good. It's not like that situation's gotten any better. And since it hasn't, why not fight Jermall Charlo?
Yeah.
Seems logical enough, though. Not likely. It's not likely that that fight comes off. And since it isn't likely, why not have Charlo fight Demetrius Andrade? Listen, I understand that in some ways, Demetrius Andrade is the architect of his own situation, his current situation, that in 2014, he walked away from a fight with Jermall's brother, Jermell. And in 2017, he walked away from a fight with Sergey Derevyanchenko, the same Sergey Derevyanchenko that Jermall Charlo just beat in his last outing. I understand that these situations lend themselves to where Demetrius Andrade is here today, but here today, he has a major promoter behind him with major financial backing, in all the ways that he didn't have that going on before. For telling me about a Jermall Charlo fight that he walked away from in 2014 that was only worth a couple of $100,000.
That's it.
That is a moot argument in 2020 when it comes to his brother in what would be a unification match worth millions.
Miss me with that stupid shit.
For being hung up on a fight that didn't happen, that was only worth then a couple $100,000, you're saying that the other brother, Jamal, he shouldn't have a fight here and now worth millions. Is that the argument? Is that the logic?
Really, nigga?
He's got a major promoter behind him with a major platform who is willing to put up the cash, willing to put up the scratch, that in all likelihood would result in more money for Jermall than what he just made fighting Sergey Derevyanchenko on pay-per-view. People can't even decide how many buys that thing did or didn't do.
I don't think he made $7 million off that fight.
And that is the relevance of that conversation. That's the only reason why fight fans here today pay such close attention to how a fight does in the pay-per-view market. You didn't make in that fight what you could be making fighting Demetrius Andrade. And in 2020, there are no excuses, no good reasons for these two guys not to fight. You're bringing up ancient history from 2014, not involving Jermall so much as involving his brother.
What about him?
But Jermall says he wants to unify, and this is the only unification fight that's available to him, because Canelo is not, and neither is Gennady Golovkin. Is this kind of grab-assery what passes for a rivalry in 2020? Is this what passes for a rivalry these days in the sport of boxing? A guy who's determined to not fight another guy? This is Amir Khan and Kell Brook all over again. Let me tell you something. The situation with the COVID-19 pandemic is stabilizing enough that Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz could be held in front of 11,000 people, 11.5 thousand to be exact. Essentially, slowly but surely, things are going back to normal. Some sense of normalcy is returning to the sport of boxing. And Jermall won't make fighting anyone else, anyone short of a Golovkin, anyone short of a Canelo.
Not that he's even fighting.
Jermall won't make fighting anyone else what he could be making if he fights Demetrius Andrade. Fighting Chris Eubank Jr. ain't gonna get you $7 million, I don't think.
Will it?
And I know you didn't make that fight in Sergey Derevianchenko, not in the absence of a live audience and not with a buy rate of, what is it, 200,000 pay-per-view buys? Or is it 120,000 pay-per-view buys? Split between 14 guys in a premium cable network, by the way. Jermall won't make fighting anyone else, short of Canelo and short of Gennady, he won't make fighting anyone else what he can be making fighting Demetrius Andrade. And before you do the whole resume song and dance, before you do that retrospect, hey, I'm not cross-comparing their resumes. I'm looking out at the landscape, seeing what's available to Jermall Charlo, who says he wants to unify, and recommending that he fights Demetrius Andrade. Why not? If Demetrius has a thin resume, then it should be easy, shouldn't it? That's all the more reason for Jermall to have that fight. I don't understand why any fight fan would be against that fight, yet that's what I'm seeing. I'm actually seeing people come up with reasons for Jermall to not fight Demetrius Andrade, and I don't understand that. In other news, Matchroom and DAZN have announced a string of cards set to go down through the months of October and November. We're all aware of this Sunday's upcoming card between Joshua Buatsi and Kalik. I'll be honest that the only fight on that card that I'm excited about is Chantel Cameron's fight with Adriana Araujo for what is now the newly vacated WBC title at 140 pounds. Babic versus Kennedy is happening on that undercard, and I will admit, Alen Babic is becoming a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. That no, he's not the most nuanced boxer, he's not the least bit subtle, but man, is he fun to watch. That's this Sunday. Moving forward, there is the Ritson versus Vasquez card, and the only fight on that card that I'm interested in is the Savannah Marshall versus Hannah Rankin middleweight title fight for what is now the newly vacated WBO title. They got a card going down in Italy, some unfamiliar names. The Estrada versus Quadras card that's going to feature Chocolatito on the undercard. That looks like an entertaining prelude to what could be a unification match between pound-for-pound fighters. Things pick up as October exits. On October 31st, we all know Alexander Usyk is going to be locking horns with Derek Chisora. That is a fight of some interest.
Yes, sir.
Dillian White is going to be taking on Alexander Povetkin for the second time to avenge the loss in November. And the two cards that I think are garnering the most criticism are the Haney versus Gamboa and Daniel Jacobs versus Gabriel Rosado cards. Look, I've expressed my discontent with those matchups. And, a subscriber here on the channel raised a very valid point in the comments under one of those videos that everybody else has gotten their chance to stage COVID cards. So why not Matchroom? Why not DAZN? Why is everybody complaining? And in hindsight, that is a very valid point. I mean, who the hell was interested in seeing Erickson Lubin fight Terrell Gausha? Porter versus Formella. I don't think anybody was falling out of their chair over that fight either. I viewed the Porter versus Formella fight as a tune-up fight in what was a COVID card. And I do think that Sean Porter has earned the right to have a lighter touch, but better still, you could classify that card as a COVID card. So if the people at the PBC can have COVID cards, and people at Top Rank certainly have, why can't Matchroom? Why can't DAZN? Frank Warren, he had his string of COVID cards. So everybody's going to lose their mind when Matchroom does the same thing? It's a valid argument. It is a valid point. I will say that in spite of that being a valid argument, I'm no more excited to see Devin Haney fight Yuriorkis Gamboa than I was before I heard that point raised. And I'm no more excited to see Daniel Jacobs fight Gabriel Rosado before I heard that valid point raised. Valid point that might have been, that still doesn't make either of those two matchups the least bit intriguing. Though I will say, I understand it.
I get it.
So I won't complain, or I won't complain much, as I myself have a genuine interest in some of these cards, an interest that maybe you guys out there might not have. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen between Cameron and Araujo. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen between Marshall and Rankin. I have a genuine interest in Usyk versus Chisora and the rematch between Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin. And according to Eddie Hearn, who I'm sure you're all aware, has tested positive for COVID-19 and will wish him a speedy recovery. He says this isn't even all of it. There are more announcements to make. There are more cards on the way. And, it's not all bad. I mean, Filip Hrgovic is set to make an appearance on that Devin Haney versus Yuriorkis Gamboa undercard. Unbeaten Filip Hrgovic, who was just in action but a few days ago on the undercard of Thorsland versus Radovanovic, a Team Sarlin Promotions card where he took on Alexandre Kartozia. It seems that the year of 2020 won't be a complete wash for Filip. This upcoming Rydell Booker fight, set to go down on the undercard of Haney versus Gamboa, will be Filip's second ring appearance this year. Unbeaten Chinese heavyweight contender Zhilei Zhang, new Matchroom signee Zhilei Zhang, he's set to be making his Matchroom debut on that card as well. For a lot of people on this side of the world, this is going to be their opportunity to get their first look at Zhilei Zhang. A lot of the fight fans in this part of the world, they're willfully ignorant. They think that a division is only limited to having 2 or 3 good fighters because they only keep up with 2 or 3 fighters. There is a lot of depth in today's heavyweight division. There are a lot of unbeaten up-and-comers like Filip Hrgovic and Zhilei Zhang that you got to keep your eyes on, because these could be the heir apparents of tomorrow. If not them, some other unbeaten contenders. Better still, this allows the fight fans in this part of the world to take stock of what is coming. So, it's not all bad. There's a silver lining in every cloud. But this cloud, Devin Haney is one of the most talented young fighters that are out there with such a high ceiling. And you want to see a fighter like this test his mettle against someone more formidable than a Yuriorkis Gamboa, who lost his last fight, tore his ACL or something like that in the process. Granted, he went the distance with Gervonta Davis, but that really does have more to do with Gervonta Davis than it does Yuriorkis Gamboa. Yuriorkis Gamboa was unable to go the distance with a journeyman in Castellanos. So when I think of him locking horns with Devin Haney, the most interest I can muster up is a cross-comparison between how Devin beats him, which I no doubts that he will, how Devin beats him, or how Gervonta Davis beat him. That's about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
In any event, some of these cards announced by Eddie Hearn as Matchroom's fall lineup are far more interesting than others, but isn't that always the case, regardless of the outfit we're talking about? Ultimately, this isn't even everything they're going to announce. There's more to come, so I'll take it. As a fight fan, I'll take it. And finally, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now, this is just my reaction to it, Deontay Wilder's longtime co-trainer Mark Breland have parted ways. That was a decision that was made, Shelley Finkel, Wilder's co-manager, told Boxing Scene on Friday. After his next fight, it will be determined if the right decision was made or not. Dees was critical of Breland's decision during the post-fight news conference. Mark threw the towel. I didn't think he should have, Dees said at the time. Deontay is the kind of guy that goes out on his shield. He will tell you straight up, don't throw the towel in. Wilder was extremely upset that Breland threw in the towel. For Mark to do it, I was very heartbroken. Wilder said soon after the rematch, if I say statements like I want to kill a man in the ring, then I have to abide by those same principles in the ring of him doing the same thing to me. I'd rather die than go out with someone throwing the towel in. Breland knows these things. It's been premeditated. I've said this for many years. I told y'all, my trainers, no matter how it might look on the outside, no matter how much you may love me or have that emotional feeling, don't make an emotional decision and do not ever throw that towel in, because my pride is everything. I understand what it looks like, but when you have power like me, I'm never out of a fight. No matter what the circumstances, I'm never out of a fight. I'm a warrior. I feel the same way I felt on fight night. If I have to go out, I want to go out on my shield, Wilder said in announcing his decision. But I understand that my corner and my team has my best interests at heart. Mark Breland is still part of Team Wilder, and our team looks forward to preparing for the trilogy fight. Now Wilder has changed his mind as he gets ready for their third fight, which is tentatively supposed to take place in December at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas in the main event of a joint pay-per-view between ESPN, Fury's broadcaster, and Fox. which televises Wilder's fights.
It's happening in December.
Well, I heard otherwise. I heard it's getting pushed into early next year. Better still, I have very little to add to this revelation, to this new development, that Wilder ended up firing Mark Breland after all. All this communicates to me is what I told you before when those comments from Wilder and JD's were first released immediately after the fight, immediately after the rematch, that Deontay Wilder is looking for a scapegoat. In that way, he is not over the loss. He's looking for someone to blame. He's blaming Mark Breland for what happened. But if Mark Breland threw that towel, it's because you were already losing that fight. You're essentially punishing him for having your best interests in mind, your best interests at heart. You know, the Maxim Dadashev fight comes to mind. The one where Buddy McGirt pleaded with Maxim to let him stop it, and he faced some resistance. Maxim wanted to go on. The rest is history. We know what happened. Do you think that Mark Breland wants something like that on his conscience in a fight that you are so obviously losing? Had he not thrown that towel, I said it before, and I'll say it again, there might not have been enough left of Wilder to bring to a third fight. If you're here, it's because of Mark, and you should be thanking your lucky stars that he threw that towel.
But JD still has his job, right?
And not for doing what is right, what is appropriate to do, what is right to do in a given situation, what a cornerman is supposed to be there to do, to look out for the fighter when the fighter can no longer look out for themselves. JD still has his job for being a yes man in many ways. And I wonder what boxing insights JD's is going to bring to the third fight that Mark Breland could not. Because out of those two guys, Mark's the fighter. Mark's the guy with the experience. Mark's the guy that knows what it's like to be in between those ropes and feel the punches raining down on you. JD's does not. Oddly enough, it's JD's that still has a job.
And it's for being a yes man.
When I look at this, that's all I see. That Deontay Wilder is still looking for someone else to blame aside from himself. And he's decided that that should be Mark Breland. Mark Breland for having thrown the towel in a fight that you were already losing.
Already lost.
You talk that cartoon Hollywood shit about going out on your shield when Mark Breland is there to perform a function. An essential function, a necessary function. And that is the function that he performed. And for that, you're punishing him. If you had it your way, there might not have been enough left of you to even have a third fight. If you had it your way, you might not have even had the faculties left to make this decision to fire Mark Breland.
Want to get fucking brain damage?
So he ended up firing Mark after all. Can't say I'm surprised, because from the moment that fight ended, Deontay Wilder was looking for something or someone to blame. It's Mark's fault.
That's it.